Hello, Dave here. This mini morsel, Learn JavaScript with Me, Chapter 6, Events, Start, End Days. We register an event. This is just a minor adjustment to another mini morsel that introduced date objects. Feel free to go ahead and check that out. This does a little math between two dates and shows us what that is. And just to show you what that is, for example, if I do 7/15/12 and 8/15/12 and click register event, it returns the event has been scheduled starting on Sunday, July 15th, ending on Wednesday, August 15th, which is a period of 31 days. So that's the math that we're going to do in our JavaScript program. Once again, I am working on this book here called Modern JavaScript, Develop and Design by Larry Ellman. I don't have a relationship with Larry Ellman except I purchased his book and I'm learning JavaScript thanks to him. So thanks for the book, Larry. So let's start by looking at the code in Notepad++, my text editor. We'll walk through the code and then we'll go ahead and debug the program. So here's the comments up here, /*/. I call it chapter 6 event.js. Here's the actual code down here. And as with the JavaScript example so far, it works bottom to top. So we start with the window.onload is equal to this wait for register event button. And that button is this button here. And this wait for register event button function will, when that button is clicked, it triggers the onSubmit event and we execute the process event function. And here is the process event function. This process event function declares a variable, right? You see var, that is declaring a variable. So we have a variable called start date in, and it references the HTML variable from the page. And we create a variable called end date in, and again that references the HTML. We create another variable called event info out, and this is our text out, and that's its name in the HTML. So these three variable assignment statements reference the HTML page. Then we create another a variable for the message. We create a variable to work the date interval. We create a variable for the day milliseconds. Notice that it's 1,000 by 60, so milliseconds, 1,000, 60 seconds, 60 seconds, 24 hours, and that gives us our, let me bring up a handy dandy calculator here, right? So if we do, what is it? 1,000 times 60 times 60 times 24 equal, and there's the 8,640,000 number. That's the magic number, the number of milliseconds in a day. So those are the number of seconds in a day. So handy number working with the date objects in JavaScript. So we could have just put that value in here, and I believe that Mr. Ullman was just teaching us where that number came from. And that's the purpose of these exercises and learning our JavaScript. So we create a variable for that amount. Then we create a variable for the start date work. And I use work for the ones that I'm using inside the program. And I create a new date variable. And notice that I do the start date in dot value. Well, that's this variable up here that's getting it from the screen, right, once the button is hit. And it is the dot value of that object. And I do the same thing with the end date work. So I'm creating two date objects here, a start date object and an end date object to work inside the program, right? And I'm going to do the math on it. So there's our declarations. And then if start date work dot get time, so that's basically saying, does it have a value? And end date work dot get time, does it have a value? And now we have a indented if, or a nested if rather. If start date work is less than end date work, right? Start date has to be before end date. Then the variable date difference is equal to end date work minus start date work. And another nested if date difference is less than or equal to day milliseconds, right, the number of milliseconds in one day, then we set this date interval to the string 1 day. Else, we're going to set the date interval equal math.round, so we're using the math object .round method, doing the date difference divided by the date millisecond, and concatenating that with the word days. And we'll go ahead and see how that works in here. Notice this is a period of 31 days. And that was just that one example. We'll do a couple of other examples in a moment, right? So now that we have this date interval defined, we can define our message out. The event has been scheduled starting on start date with the locale date string. And this method puts out the date in this type of a format here, Sunday, comma, July 15th, 2012. And just take a look at there's many different output strings that you can do with dates. This is a very common one, and it does it with your local date string. And it's basically just concatenating that together. Then we do some more concatenation, right, with the plus equal and ending on end date, right, locale date string, and concatenating that together with, which is a period of concatenated with the date interval plus, and we have a period there. Okay, else our message out, the start date must come before the end date, right? So that else, right? So we have an if, this if, else, if, else, if, else. Message out, please enter valid start and end dates with a format. And then we have another if down here with this text content method or the inner text method. So text content is only available in certain browsers, so we make sure that it is usable before we go ahead and take advantage of it and execute that method. Otherwise, we'll execute the other method. And generally, for Chrome and Firefox, text.content is available, and then we return false to to start over again. So let's so there's our JavaScript code, and we're going to go ahead and walk through that in the debugger in a moment. And let's just take a quick look at the HTML here. And you'll notice, right, here's the form. This is the important part, right, or the part that we're really using. Here's the form, right? Here's our form here, right? Here's our output that we just talked about. And here's the dates that we enter and the button that we push. So here's that form, right? And here's our event info out ID. And here's our date in, start date in, end date in, and the button. And once again, this code will be available on davecoast.com, and you can also go out and debug it and look at it at js.davecoast.com. I have all my exercises out here, and this one is Chapter 6, Event Start and End Days. I'm just working on it on my XAMPP server locally for testing purposes. But once again, I can just zip back to my Chapter 6 exercises and execute it, or go back to the showcase where I have them all listed and execute this one. So once again, if I don't put anything in these, I hit register event, it asks me to fill out a field. I could put a value in here. I could put 9, 9, 12, and I can put 8, 7, 12. And if I hit register event, notice the start date must come before the end date. Let's zip back here for a second. Remember that was this if statement here. Right, here's the else. So this is if the date whereas start date must come before, else if start date less than end date, right? And I purposely put it in with the start date not less than. Let's go ahead and make it less than. If I do 7, and if I do it on one day, right, do it on the same day. Let's do 7, 9, 7, 9, right? Since they're equal, it's not going to be less than. So I guess it's really not possible to have it equal to one day. Interesting. Didn't really test that before. And our other case, right? So we have our, and finally, right, if we have invalid dates in there, please enter valid dates. So if I do 77, 99, 12, register event, please enter valid start and end dates in MMDDY format. Okay. After thinking about that for a second, I might wait a second. It is possible. This if statement is if date difference less than or equal to day milliseconds, then date interval is equal to 1 day. So let's go ahead and do 1 day on there. And if I do 7, 9, 12, and 7, 10, 12, right? The event has been scheduled starting on the 9th, ending on the 10th, which is a period of 1 day, right? Without the days, right? And that is this if statement here. And how it puts that together. So there's our 3 basic if-else scenarios. So let's go ahead and wrap up. Let's go ahead and run this thing through Debugger just to see the code in action. So I'm going to just go ahead and refresh this. Whoops, wrong exercise. And let's go ahead. And I'm in Chrome, and that was nice doing it in Chrome. And I could do it in Firebug Lite on Chrome. But when it comes to debugging, I prefer to do it in Firefox because it has the spiffiest, best debugger on that I'm aware of. So if you know of a better debugger, please let me know about it. So here we are in Firefox. Let's turn on Firebug, and I'm going to just separate this guy so that we can see it all on the same screen here. And let's just take that over a little bit there. And it came up with the HTML. So let's get the JavaScript, because that's what we're interested in. We're learning JavaScript. Here's that JavaScript code. Notice it is the same code from the editor. And in Firebug, I can set a breakpoint within my process event function on the first executable statement, which is creating this start in variable. So let's go ahead and do a couple of dates, and I will do 7/4/12 and 7/10/12, and I'll hit the button. And it did not hit my breakpoint. Am I on the wrong line there? Let's try that again. Refresh that. Bring up our debugger. And why did it skip that line? I am going to go ahead and click register event. And there we go. Not sure why it didn't happen last time. But I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and walk through this. So it already executed this line up above. And I think the issue was I just failed to refresh it before I started. Notice that it still didn't enter the dates here. Here's our two dates. We're right here. This statement has been executed. It broke on this line. You can see it's highlighted. This value is still undefined. These values are all undefined here. So let's go ahead and start stepping through our handy dandy Firebug. We have this step guy right here. And you can also hit F11. I'll go ahead and click it. So now end date in, right, is now referencing this value. So we've created this variable, we've created this variable, we're about to create this variable. Let's keep going. Now we've created another variable. You can see our variables are created out here, and they are referencing these HTML variables, right? Notice if I hovered over these guys, it's highlighting them. It's a beautiful thing, just hovering in Firebug. And let's go ahead and execute the next one. Now I've created the message out variable. It's a string, and it's an empty string, right? Because that's all I gave it was an empty string. And we created that date interval. Now we're about to create the day milliseconds, and this should equal the 864 number, the 868,640,000. And there it is here, day milliseconds. And again, I can hover over it. You see the 864,000 number. Let's keep going. And we created this start date work, and notice it has the green value there. That means it is a object, as opposed to these values here. That notice the red quotes. There's nothing in there, but the red quotes is a string. The green is an object. And go ahead and create the end date work. Right, so this guy now has July 4th. This guy has July 10th. And now we're going to do the if. And so there's the first part of the if. Now we have to do the and. So they both have values. Now, is start date work less than end date work? Yes, it is. So we'll calculate this. We'll create this date difference variable. We create the date difference variable, and it is a pretty big number there. And again, you can see those values over here. There's that number. In our watch value variable list, but it's almost easier to just hover, and you can see the same value by hovering your cursor or your pointer. That dated me by using the term cursor. Okay, so the date difference less than or equal to the day millisecond calculation. Well, it is not less than or equal to, it's greater than 1 day. So we are executing the else of that if, and we're going to go ahead and set this date interval into this math round method for the math object based on this calculation. And now date interval is equal to 6 days, the difference between 7/4 and 7/10. And we'll start putting together the message out variable. Right now there's nothing in there. So let's do 1, 2, 3. And you see that message out is equal to the event has been scheduled, and it is a period of 6 days. So let's go ahead and execute. And we pop down here, and we either execute the text content or the inner text. And we're going to go ahead. Text content is available in Firefox. So now, once we execute this statement, we should see our value show up here in the HTML on the form. So I click it one more time. We executed that statement, and here's our result for viewing purposes. And one more click, and we have completed because we did the return false. I will go ahead and remove the breakpoint and turn off, well, I'll go ahead and attach this to the bottom and turn off Firebug on this page. And you see that this event has been scheduled, and there's our period of 6 days. And that is doing a little date math with date objects in JavaScript from Chapter 6 of Modern JavaScript, Develop and Design by Larry Ullman. And this is Dave from Dave Coast. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And I will, once I finish the other two Chapter 6 exercises, which are entering arrays and objects, I'll put all these together in a post, have all this code ready for downloading. In the meantime, you can always go to js.davecoast.com and take a look at them. Go on out here. You can either go by chapter or they're all listed in what I call the showcase. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and hope you're learning JavaScript along with me.